The Georgia Bulldogs remain undefeated after beating the Missouri Tigers this past weekend. This is starting the toughest stretch of games for Georgia on their schedule this year, with Missouri last week, Ole Miss this week, and at Tennessee the week after. So this was a real litmus test for what we're going to see from this Georgia team going forward. And both Georgia and Missouri did a lot of things well, and they both did some things not so well. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and also, moving forward for the Georgia Bulldogs. So, Drew, kicking it to you, we talked about this in the preview prediction. You think that this Georgia team is solid pretty much everywhere around, but that secondary is a little bit softer compared to the rest of the position groups. How do you think the secondary fared against the strong receiving core from Missouri?
Well, there's obviously strengths of the Georgia secondary, and there are some weaknesses. I think Dalen Everett, one of the corners for Georgia, I think he struggled a little bit to find the ball in this game, and he kind of reminds me a little bit of Keely Ringo in ways, as in you'll find him in positions to make plays, but he just has trouble finding the football when it's in the air. We saw it at the end of the game, and Georgia was up 31-20. Missouri kind of had that last chance drive. And there was a couple times where Brady Cook was just getting the ball snapped to him and he wasn't ready for it. So he would just throw a desperation back shoulder pass to the outside receiver that Dalen Everett was on. And 2 times in a row, Dalen Everett just struggled to find the football and got caught on both times on pretty much a broken play. And you can't have that. You got to be able to make plays when the ball is thrown to you and you're in the position, or else there's going to be teams out there that can expose that. I do think the safeties for Georgia played really well in this game. Luther Burden had 1 touchdown at the beginning of the game, the first quarter. And really, out after that, he wasn't really much of a factor. I know he got hurt for a little bit, but he came back in. But really, Georgia had answers to shut down Luther Burden. One of the main things, though, Aiden, I talk about the secondary that struggled a little bit. I think they did well for the most part against Missouri. They held Brady Cook for 14 for 30. I was a little surprised to see Missouri run the football the way they did. Cody Schrader, the running back for Missouri, had over 100 yards against Georgia. I think he finished with 112 on like 22 carries. That's a pretty good game, especially going into Athens. There's not a lot of you could probably on one hand name running backs that have gotten over 100 yards against Georgia since Kirby Smart's even been there. So Cody Schrader ran the ball well, and that's kind of concerning for this Georgia defense moving forward when you play a team like Ole Miss or Tennessee coming up, both who are good at running the football. And if a teams can find a way to control the ground against this Georgia Bulldogs defense, I think Georgia's defense can give up a lot of points.
Yeah, Cody Schrader, Missouri found a lot of success with that outside zone, and they were going to it consistently throughout the whole entire game. And for some reason, Cody Schrader was just consistently able to get the edge, which is something that you don't normally see from these Georgia defenses, Drew, with linebackers, like Roquan Smith and that prototype of linebacker where they're not 250 pounds, they're 220 pounds, but they run a 4.40. So they have that sideline to sideline speed. In that Missouri game, a lot of time Cody Schrader was beating them to the sideline and able to get upfield. And that's where a lot of the success came from Missouri's run game. In my prediction for this game, Drew, I thought that the Georgia run defense was going to stifle that run attack from Missouri and make them a lot more one-dimensional and, make them throw a lot more. But Missouri was using the throwing to set up the running. And then towards, as they needed, the possessions more and more, they started to lean on the run more and more. And that's alarming if you're a Georgia fan because you're used to being able to sit behind elite defenses where you don't have to worry about a team driving the ball 75 yards down the field. But in that Missouri game, you saw that Brady Cook was able to move the ball down the field consistently on the Georgia defense. Now, in the fourth quarter, when they really, really needed it, Georgia's defense came up with 2 big picks. The first one from that big man off of some great pressure, but Brady Cook made a very, very bad decision. You just got to throw that ball away on that pick to the big man. But other than that, I was surprised to see Georgia's defense, really get pushed all the way back into the red zone. Now, when they got into the red zone, they did a great job of holding Missouri to field goals instead of touchdowns, which we also talked about in our preview prediction. You have to come away with 7 points instead of 3 in the red zone, man. Like, that is crucial. Georgia wasn't getting, as many touchdowns per red zone trip as usual either. And I think that's why the score was a little bit lower as far as Georgia is concerned. The over-under was 55.5, and that did not hit. But, Drew, with that being said, y'all, Georgia goes to play Ole Miss next week. You mentioned it, Jackson Dart in the run game with the running back Judkins. How do you think that this Georgia defense is going to fare against this Ole Miss offense, which is arguably better than Missouri's?
Yeah, Ole Miss is a really good offense with a lot of talented players on there. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Ole Miss score a decent amount of points. I think, fortunately for Georgia, though, I don't think Ole Miss's defense is as good as Missouri's. And I think Georgia's going to really have to win this game by kind of outscoring Ole Miss. You would have to think that Ole Miss is going to have to score in the 30s in this game to beat Georgia, especially in Athens. That's just a tough ask, and it was just confirmed yesterday that Georgia's getting this game at night. And typically when Georgia gets home games at night, they usually play, they get attribute bonuses in every single category you can think of. So that's a benefit for Georgia. But at the same breath, though, I really did think Georgia was going to play Missouri at home and cover this spread. I think Georgia was a better team than Missouri, although Missouri is a good team. Let's give them credit for where credit's due. Missouri is a good football team, and they gave Georgia everything they could. And so it doesn't matter. Even if Georgia is at home, you can't just pencil in a win. We've seen multiple teams come into Sanford Stadium and have some success on offense. And we can't just assume that just because Georgia's getting a home game at nighttime, that this Ole Miss offense is going to get slowed down completely, because Georgia's also banged up a little bit on the defensive end too. Jamon Dumas-Johnson, it looked like I didn't read the full injury report just yet. All I know is when he came off the field after he got hurt, he wasn't moving his left arm. So I'm assuming it was something with his shoulder or maybe something with his arm. He's going to be out for this game. I don't see any scenario where he plays. So Georgia's their second string and third string guys are going to have to be ready to go, which Georgia does rotate a lot of defensive linemen and linebackers in the game anyway. So a lot of these guys already have some realistic, game experience reps. And I think that's going to help Georgia down the road, because I think a lot of these guys are going to have to step up. We're just getting to that point in college football now where you're going to have a lot of injuries, and your second and third string guys are going to have to be ready to go. But this is what Kirby Smart does so well, is he recruits and he gets so much depth amongst the defense and the offense, really, that these backup players are ready to go. And they're going to have to be ready against this Ole Miss offense.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest reasons why Georgia's defense is so solid, in recent history throughout the four quarters of pretty much every single game, is because in the third and fourth quarter, they can go to their 2 and 3 deep and, start subbing guys in, and it keeps the defense fresh the whole entire game. Through a 8 or 9, 10 play drive, you're constantly subbing guys in and out. So that's going to make a big, impact on the freshness of your defense. And it is next man up for Georgia. I don't think they'll take too far of a step back without him. But one big thing that you brought to my attention before this Missouri game, we were talking about the game. You said that this Georgia defense is really, really good. Of course, it's, Kirby Smart coach defense. But this year, unlike years on Georgia teams past, there's no, star-studded player on that defense. There's no one guy that, the defense revolves around. And you could kind of tell that in the Missouri game. There's not a D lineman who's getting insane push up the A gap. There's not a linebacker covering the whole length of the field, not allowing, the running back to run up field. So defense, it is an 11-man, it's 11-man job. Unlike offense where, you can get away with 2 or 3 guys, every single person on that defense has to do their job. With that being said, though, you would like to have a star player on that defense. And in these next 2 games against Ole Miss and Tennessee, someone on that defense is going to have to step up, because I don't think they'll lose both games. And they'll probably win both games, but there's going to be one of these 2 games where it is going to be close, and someone on that defense needs to step up and make a play. And I don't know who that's going to be right now.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at every great team that's won a national championship or any kind of championship in any sport you can think of, I mean, there's always that 1 or 2 guys that you can just trust when the moment gets bright to come away and really put the team on their back. And you look at a bunch of Georgia defenses in years past where they've just been elite and historically great, there's always those 1 or 2 guys, if not more, that you can look at and be like, okay, I could trust this guy when the game's on the line, or I could trust this guy when the game's on the line. And like I said, Aiden, there's just a bunch of really, really good football players in this Georgia defense, but I've yet to see that one guy that's capable of taking over a football game. And you said it. It's 11-man football. Everyone on the defense has to be able to do their job. But at some point, man, you got to be able to make plays when no one else can. Sometimes offensive coordinators are going to have an answer for what you're doing on defense. It's up to that one guy or 2 guys to be able to just kind of have that instinct to go kind of out of their comfort zone to make a play. And we've seen guys like Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter be able to do that and really change the course of a game. And really, I need to see this defensive line step up, and I need to see the perimeters, the defensive ends really find ways. I don't know. I'm not at the Georgia football practices. I don't know what Kirby Smart's talking about in his defensive meetings and how he wants his defensive linemen to play. I don't know if this is something that is coached. This Missouri game was not the first time that Georgia's been getting beat on these stretch and zone runs. There's been a lot of trouble, especially when there's a mobile quarterback in the backfield on the other team, where Georgia's been getting beat on the outside. And that, like you said, that's just something that hasn't ever been an issue for Georgia really since Kirby Smart's been there. Again, I don't know if the defensive ends are told to crash in like that, because mainly when you look at these runs that teams are getting to the outside of Georgia, it's just that defensive ends losing containment. And unfortunately, the linebackers, I just think, aren't as fast this year as in years past. So Georgia's going to have to get that cleaned up. The film's out on them now. Ole Miss and Tennessee, they're well coached offensively, and they're going to be able to see the weaknesses of Georgia's defense and see what has worked for other teams, and they're going to try it. And so far, Georgia hasn't shown me that they've been able to stop what a lot of these teams are doing that have success. So until I see that happening, I'm a little worried moving forward. This is a tough 3-game stretch. People were talking about how soft Georgia's schedule was at the beginning of the year, and at the beginning of the year, it did look like it was a pretty weak schedule. Now I think it's a little bit different. I think people are starting to realize that there are some teams in the SEC that have kind of came a long way. Missouri, Ole Miss, no one really expected these teams to be this highly ranked. And there's not a lot of teams in college football that could probably make it through this 3-game stretch undefeated. And I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia lost one of these games. I said that before they even hit the Missouri game. Georgia could very well lose one of these games coming up between Missouri, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. Thankfully, Georgia has the benefit of the doubt right now. They have 2 national championships. Georgia kind of has that mulligan where I think if they lose a game in the regular season and still make the SEC title game and win, that they're still going to get in the playoffs. So it's not going to be the end of the world if Georgia loses, but as a Georgia fan, I would rather be 12-0 in the SEC title game and have that game more for seeding than going in and playing, say, Alabama and have to win to get in the playoffs.
Yeah, Drew, and when you're looking at the Ole Miss game and the Tennessee game going forward, offensively, I believe you guys are good enough to compete with any team in college football. It's just different from this Georgia team, because like we've been talking about, the defense. Whenever you look at Ohio State with Jim Knowles in his second year as a defensive coordinator, their defense has literally taken a exponential step forward. Michigan's defense, elite. Top tier teams in the country, they have elite defenses. And if you want to be an elite team in college football, you have to be elite on both sides of the ball. Now, can Georgia win? It's looking like they can win shootouts. But whenever you play a great team that is great on offense and defense, your defense is going to have to come up with some stops. And I just don't know in the big picture how good Georgia's defense is matching up against Ohio State, Michigan, and some of the other teams in the top 4 or 5 in the country.
Yeah, 100%. I think Georgia's offense has played well. There were a couple times in the Missouri game where I actually was questioning what Bobo was doing. I think this is one of his, maybe not his best performances as a play caller this year, but nonetheless, Georgia still scored 30 points, and I think Georgia could score in the 30s and get away with a win a lot of times. So hopefully Georgia can keep that going. Carson Beck played okay. Again, wasn't his best game. Georgia ran the ball, again, okay, but nothing great. Georgia didn't really do anything great offensively, but they just did good enough. And if Georgia's defense can get that whole situation figured out, everything we just talked about, Georgia's offense can probably get away with just playing just good enough on offense and getting away with the win. I do think Carson Beck's he's got to figure out that problem where he has with defensive linemen batting the ball down. That has been an issue that's been kind of glaring to me the past couple of weeks, where he's had a lot of passes batted down the line of scrimmage. He's got to get that figured out, but he's not turning the ball over. That's all I can ask for. No interceptions. That will take you a long way. But that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And I'm sure a lot of you guys watching this, there's a lot of Georgia fans and even just SEC football fans or college football fans in general that watch a lot of Georgia games. So I'm sure y'all have seen plenty of Georgia football. Let us know down below in the comment section what catches your eye about this Georgia team. What are some things that they need to clean up? And are they capable of making it through this regular season and SEC title game if they were to make it undefeated and find themselves in the playoffs at 13-0? Let us know down below. But that's going to do it, guys. We'll see you in the next one.